Hey everyone, my name is Carlos and I'm the founder and CEO of Product School. Today it's my pleasure to host Hubert Palan, a founder and CEO of Productboard. We're going to chat with him in a second. Let me show his photo first, although you'll see his face as well very soon. And his story is really cool. He and I met a long time ago and they've been building a really cool product that is becoming the system of record for product managers. It's very meta. It's building a product for product people. So we'll talk about his personal story and all things product. So let me say hi to you. Hey, Hubert, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me here. Looking forward to the chat.
Let's jump into it. Your story is very interesting. So why don't we start from the beginning? Tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you kind of end up in Silicon Valley building Productboard.
Oh yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot. It's like, oh, you have such an interesting story. Look, I don't know. I grew up in Prague in the Czech Republic. I got my master's in computer science and I joined a consulting company, Accenture. And I was doing these, big projects for large banks. And then I said, screw it, this is crazy. Everything takes years to do. And I'm just gonna move to Silicon Valley. And I figured that a good way to do it would be to get education and go, to school. And so I ended up getting an MBA at Berkeley. And that was a life-changing event because suddenly I was surrounded by the entrepreneurs here and I would go to all the networking parties and I would do all the pitch competition without having any clue what it is all about. And then I didn't know much about startups, but Steve Blank was my professor and Lean Startup was just starting and it was just the perfect kind of melting pot for everything, startup related. And then I tried to start a company and then my co-founder, my classmate said like, hey, I got 2 kids and this is a great idea, but I got this offer to join Salesforce and they're going to pay me, 200K annually. And like, I'm out. I was like, okay. So that was the first attempt and it fell apart. I lost the co-founder. And then I joined another startup, which was angel funded by Steve Blank. It was a marketplace for speakers and event planners. And we tried to make it work for a year and didn't go anywhere. But I also was on a business visa or like, on an OPT, for people international. Anyway, I couldn't stay in the country. I needed the company to sponsor me. And so I needed to find another company. I found another company. And Andreessen Horowitz funded startup, Good Data, business intelligence platform. My visa got denied twice. I had to leave the country. I couldn't come back. And anyway, and at the end of the day, the visa got approved after spending like 40K on legal fees. And I ended up here and I grew with this company for 4 years, 100 million in funding, Andreessen and other investors. And I eventually I grew to be a VP product. I started as a relatively, mid-level, like junior product manager, and I grew to be a VP product. And I was just sitting in the middle of the perfect storm as every product managers, talking to customers, salespeople, my CEO, all over the place, right? Trying to do different things at the same time all the time. And I was super frustrated that I didn't have any tool to help me do product management job really in a focused way. And that led to founding Productboard as a central system of record, as kind of a CRM of product management. And we can dive more deeper into it, but I have the ramen stage of starting a company. I moved my co-founder into my place and moved my wife into an empty apartment around the corner. And, I became vegetarian for a while because meat was too expensive. Crazy stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so that's it in a nutshell. Oh, and now we are a 200-person company. We have raised 65 million Kleiner Sequoia Index. So looking back, it was a overnight success, but it started the company 6 years ago. So things take longer than you expect.
Yeah. That's very inspiring, Hubert. Thank you for sharing. And as an immigrant, I also resonate with that story. I actually know what an OPT visa is, and I also know what it is to get your visa rejected. And so I'm glad this worked out for you in many ways. And it's definitely 10-year overnight success, right? As they call it.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. You wanna come to this country. I look how many jobs I've created. There's like 100 jobs. And yeah, and it's just difficult. Anyway, separate story.
So let's say, okay, after you had multiple attempts, you actually feel the pain as a product person to have like a better platform to do your thing. What were you using before? Like, were you putting together like Microsoft Word and Google Sheets or what?
I mean, look, like I'm in my 40s, right? So throughout my career, it was like everything. Microsoft Project, Microsoft Access, like, all like spreadsheets all over, right? And then obviously most recently, in the most recent years, it's tools that engineering uses. It's Jira, it's GitHub, it's tools that were designed for engineering task management. And then on top of that, you try to hack something together with project management tools, Asana, Trello, like pick your favorite one. And then you just scramble with all the stuff in between. It's like, okay, what's the feedback from the customers? And you copy paste in spreadsheets and so on and so on. You try to make sense of it. You put it in PowerPoint decks. You put the roadmaps in PowerPoint decks. Kind of like the status quo inertia. I mean, we might get later into it, but how crazy is it that the tools that we use to get the product, to build the products and get them out of the door to the market, they don't have the foundational entity that is at the center of all of it, which is the customer. If you look at the CRM systems, the business side, like the marketing automation, like customers at the center, everything customer relationship management, customer. And if you look at Jira and the world around it, it's only features, stories, tasks, like the entity doesn't even exist in the logical data model. And yet you're supposed to build products that are great, product-led, but it needs to be customer-centric, right? And doesn't exist. Anyway, it's just like mind-blowing if you think about it that way, that everything is product, but where's the customers and their problems, their pain points, their jobs to be done? Like everything that we talk about in product management, like there's no system where it's captured. It's just crazy.
I agree. And I mean, as a product person, I think that also just to be further there, I felt similar problems. I was trying to, put to using documents or other formats that weren't really meant for a product person as a customer. Like I don't remember, even when I started product school 6 years ago, there wasn't really at least that much mainstream technology. So we were still piggybacking on PowerPoints and things like that to teach how to build a roadmap. And it's like, that's absolutely crazy. Like I can't imagine that the person who created PowerPoint even considered roadmap as a potential use case number 200,
That's funny. Well, it's interesting what you're describing because it's not just the tools, right? It's not just that there's no like a software product application that helps. It's also that the product management doesn't really have that of a standardized framework, because on the delivery side you have agile methodology, which was designed for delivery part of product development, right? And again, it's agile manifesto written, and everybody knows agile now. But where's the concept of market segmentation? Where's the concept of how do you define strategy? Because your long-term vision is too big to execute right now, right? Like you need to have a thoughtful set of steps. Whereas everything that you do around the user research, how you translate it into the objectives and the immediates. Where's the concept where you put the prioritization scheme or framework? Like that's not really centralized anywhere and codified in some kind of framework methodology. Lean Startup did a bunch of standardization and kind of framework building, but it's very much around the initial product market fit discovery. It's not something that you would use on a continuous basis to refine strategy, continuously listen to the market. There's, again, if you look at that set of methodologies, there's or like the customer development process and everything that's Steve and others worked on. The strategic aspect of product management is not existing there. So I would just like to highlight that is the opportunity for us as product managers, not just to build the tools, but also advance the craft and create a framework that will help us make better products ultimately, because it will guide us, make better decisions, understand customer better, create more alignment, all of it. Again, a big topic to discuss.
Absolutely. And I feel like we could do multiple sessions on some of the things that we are briefly touching on here. So talking about product managers as a craft. Obviously, there are a lot of people who try to use your product in different ways, and being a platform, it's not easy because you also have to kind of somehow optimize for like different user personas. So how do you think about building this type of system of record for multiple product teams who might be organized in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it comes down to the basics, to the core, and that's logical data model. If you're listening and you know what logical data model is, that's a good kind of a core thing of software product development. But it's basically what are the core entities and what are the relationships between them. It's and in product management, if I were to really simplify it, it is the customer, or like the people, then their problems, and then their product. And that's the triad, that's the trinity, right? And so my point is that if you want to design a system that's optimized for the needs of product managers, you need to have a system where you have the people and the customers, and you can segment them. You can understand how similar they are. You can look at different attributes by which they differ. When it comes to the second piece, the problems. Okay, what are the needs? What are the pain points? What are the jobs to be done? That needs to be there. And then the third one is the product. Okay, features, whatever the terminology you want to use, and how they aggregate into components and product portfolios and so on. And so that's how we're thinking about it, and how, I mean, the best product teams think about it this way, right? That you need to have all the pieces together. And so we're architecting a product where you have the customers and you have the insights and conversations, and you bring them together and you centralize them all, and you make sure that everything that you're prioritizing, and if you're trying to figure out what should be on the roadmap, that it's supported by the insights, and there's a link between who needs it, who's going to benefit from it. And if you have something on the roadmap, like, okay, like, why are things on the roadmap? And then also, sometimes even more importantly, why are some things not on the roadmap? Like, what was left out and why? Because it's not relevant for a specific customer segment, and it doesn't serve the pain point or the need that we deem the most important to focus on this quarter or whatever this year, And I know I'm giving you a broad answer, but this cuts down to the chase. And people ask me, okay, how do I get into product management? What do I need? Well, understanding of the customers and the needs is the most important thing. Then obviously, depending on what's the product, and then you need to know how to solve it. And okay, how am I gonna come up with feasibility? And you need to understand technology if you're building digital technology-based product. But the customers in the middle and the segmentation is critical. I'm happy to go deeper or more specific if you want. It's just I can't emphasize this enough.
I mean, it's very interesting for me to hear you, because like you come from an engineering background, you work in consulting, you've been to business school, so obviously you can wear many hats. And I also want to dig a little bit deeper into that. Like, in your experience, what do you think are some of those skills that served you well to grow first as a product person, but then eventually as a CEO of a 200+ company?
Yeah, I look, it comes down again to these key areas, right? So I started in engineering, so that gave me understanding of the technology and what's possible to do with software, right? Like what can be built. So that was my initial first step. But then there's a layer on top of that, which is communication skills and ability to get buy-in of others and so on. And I learned that in consulting. That was more than anything. I didn't learn much about how to build a great startup or how to build a great digital product. No, but I learned how to stand in front of an executive of a large bank and present to them like, hey, this is the plan, or talk to them about problems and what they have. And so it was very much communication school for me. And then the business school added the business aspect. It was like, okay, let's think about revenue. Let's think about metrics. Let's think about analytics. Let's think about even the legal aspects, obviously, of running a business. And then domain experience, I learned by doing product management. There's no school. I mean, there's school now. Yeah, gotcha. But when I was growing up, there was no school, right? There was not. I would go and I would read like the traditional market strategy case studies. Because, so this is interesting, actually, the digital product management is fairly new discipline, like relatively speaking in the history of time. But, fast moving consumer goods companies like Procter & Gamble or Unilever, they've been doing product management, 100 years. And the understanding of like, okay, this is how you go and how you interview customers. This is how you prototype. This is how you segment the market. This is how you try, iterate, and so on. It's obviously much more fast now, and like you use slightly different techniques, but the core is the same. Sometimes I joke that that it's like it came from marketing, right? It came from the marketing strategy aspect, and that we need to learn that. We almost forgot that. We jumped into the digital world from the technology side, like, hey, software, I can code, I can program anything. But we kind of like forgot, well, there's the whole marketing strategy aspect, which is the core of product management. Product management used to report to marketing. There was no separate, like, chief product officer. Now there is, but it wasn't the case. Anyway, so that's the learning there. And so I piecemeal through my career all these pieces together. And then design, I wish I got into design sooner, but then I don't know, 10 years ago, right, when I moved over here and I was in the startups, we were like, oh my God, like user experience is so important, and the delight and all that. And I read everything about design, and I would stalk people from Cooper, to learn about user-centered design, and I partnered with them. I hired them, I learned from them, and that gave me exposure to design. And I just like obsessively would look at every product that got launched and every product hunt, products of the month, and we would go and we would look at the new patterns. And so it was I know that it's a lot, right? And Martin Kagan always, I joke that he always scares people because his message is like, it's so hard. Product management is so hard. Like it is hard, but it's just like, it's a lot, but you need to like chip away on it, like step by step, right? And the broader you have the experience. But I mean, stay focused. If you're in a specific domain, if you're in a specific industry, the more you learn about that specific area, the easier it is.
Yeah, and I mean, I obviously get that question a lot. We have a lot of students who come to us saying, hey, I want to be a product manager at Google or Airbnb or whatever cool company there is. And it's obviously from the outside, everything, the grass always looks greener on the other side. And it's true that it's rewarding, but there's also a lot of stuff that people don't see that goes behind the scenes, that it's not sexy at all, that you have to crank. And I also try to be realistic, because first, it's not always easy. And second, it takes time. As you said, it's almost like a lifetime job where you were putting pieces together without really knowing. I mean, everything worked out and connected this way, but could have gone in a different direction. And I think that's part of the beauty of being a generalist, that you can be curious enough to dig into different areas and somehow connect the dots. When I look at emails, when I look at products, I also look at them with a product mindset. I'm looking at, interesting email, look at their call to action, or look at interesting copy or design. Like, you cannot develop the eye to this clinical eye to not just stay in the surface, but really try to understand what's behind the person who created that product. And that can be obsessive. Like, I don't think it ever ends. And I can understand also for some people working with product people, that can be frustrating, because we have opinions and we want them to be heard, and obviously it's not always the case, but it's a love-hate relationship sometimes with so many things going on.
Here's one thing that I would say, and I would highlight for product managers, like relatively early in the career. Typically when you join a company, it's like, I want to be a product manager at Google or Airbnb. I mean, set aside like how you get into specific companies and so on. But in terms of the scope, there's three pieces, just like there's, people, problems, product. It's kind of like the core entities. Then there's, in terms of the overall process, there's the product vision, product strategy, and product execution. Vision is like long-term. What is it that we're marching towards? Strategy is like the sequence. Okay, what are we going to build next, and how we're going to get to the long-term vision. And execution, how do you get aligned everybody, and how do you make sure that everybody's bought in and knows what they're doing and so on. If you're a product manager, relatively junior or even mid-level, what differs is the scope of your product of your responsibility, right? So the more junior you are, the smaller scope you have. Like, you have just like one specific feature, or you have just like smaller part of the product. And then the more senior you are, the bigger responsibility you have. And ultimately, as a chief product officer, you own the whole product. I would highlight people. I see people frequently trying to show that they can do more in terms of the breadth, in terms of, oh, I understand more use cases and there's more other components, like, all the other stuff that we could be doing. That's great, but I would challenge people to go deeper in that narrow area. And it's very rare that I hear from people who own some part of the product about like the long-term product vision for that specific area. And like dig deeper and focus on like how, because then you own a little bit piece of the vision, strategy, execution. If you think of it as a triangle, you get a slice of everything, as opposed to just focus on an execution. And if I ask you, like, what do you think that the product could be in this area in 2 years? Like, ooh, I don't know. Like, I'm bogged down for this sprint, whatever. That's what shows that you have the long-term thinking. And so more addressing, even if it's the narrow scope. I hope it makes sense, because it's like, jumping and just a random thought that I had the other day. And I thought it was useful, because then the senior people listen. If it's too broad, like they usually know the broad view people have, because they've been around and they see the organization and so on. But if you go deeper in some specific area and you highlight some of the value or some of the different approaches, or you highlight competition, what they're doing, then it's refreshing point of view.
I agree. And I also want to know about you now, because you're a curious mind. You want to keep learning. So what's in your bookshelf right now? How do you learn? How do you make sure that there is time for you to continue growing?
I listen to podcasts, 2x, or whatever, it's depending on the how quickly people speak. And I read books. So I do this thing that I listen to books, and then when I find out that they're valuable and that there's more to them, then I buy them on Kindle and I go and I read them, or like I highlight things that are important. I listen to a lot of the like strategic podcasts, Stratechery, Ben Thompson. I listen to A16Z. In my case right now, there's a lot of the business side, right? It's not just the product side. It's like, how do you run business? How do you build culture? How do you scale the company? So that's where I spend my time a lot. And then I try to speak. I know that you had it somewhere in questions, like, well, do you do things that don't scale? I try to speak one-on-one with people and dig deeper. And, we're building marketing teams. So now I'm talking to the CMOs to learn more about marketing, right? Talk to CMO of LinkedIn, DocuSign, and others who have a lot of experience, who've seen scale. And it's still, it's like dig deeper and be able to ask questions, because at that point you need like a specific angle, and your team is specific and different skill set and so on. So I do. I mean, I have a long list of recommendations for readings if people are interested.
Well, and one of your professors in Berkeley, Steve Blank, was one of the fathers of this customer development movement, or the book, The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. It's one of the first business books that I read. I also come from an engineering background, went to Berkeley, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So not in general, but like having him as a professor was really amazing, because I remember one thing he always said of getting out of the building. Well, now with COVID, it's different, but like talking to customers, let's put it that way, it's something that doesn't really scale, but it's really important.
I mean, I'm reading right now Zone to Win. It's by Geoffrey Moore. It's one of his latest books on how you do innovation at scale at large companies. Monetizing Innovation is an incredible pricing book. It's by one of the founding partners at Simon Kucher Partners. It's just like everything that you need to know about pricing, structure, packaging. Another great book. Yeah, and The Culture Code. It's like how you build culture companies. It's and then I have The Emotional Life of the Toddler. Because I have a 5-month-old baby. I see this here. I haven't listened to that one. Look, High Growth Handbook by Elad Gil it's like one of I think it's the best book ever for entrepreneurs. So this is just not product managers, but if you're thinking about going into entrepreneurship, he gives you super concrete advice, like how you choose board members, the structure, equity. Like, it's awesome. Like, I highly recommend that book. Yeah. Category Creation, Anthony Canada, Gateside. Yeah.
So Uwe, I cannot finish this interview without asking you about that My Life in Weeks painting that I see on your wall. You have to tell us what that is, please.
Oh yeah, it's you said about it. Look, it's life is finite, right? Like we're around only for a allocated period of time, and I live my life. I have like two core principles. One is to treat other people with love and respect, and the other one is to live my life productively. And so this is, you can order it. It's called 4,000 Weeks, and it's based on your age and other demographics. It basically generates this poster, and every dot represents 1 week of your life, and you fill it out one by one. And so it reminds you that life is short and that you need to be focused on the most important things every day, every week. And it's can be a little grim, but as Carlos mentioned, we can look at it that my life is half, like there's still half left, right? It's half, not half empty, but half full. Glass, the same idea. So yeah, it's eliminates stress, but it also reminds you that there's important things in life to do.
I think we don't talk enough about how important being an optimistic person is in general, and it's contagious. Like when I see you speaking, smiling, sharing your story, that's something that maybe it's not in any business book, but it's definitely really important. So I appreciate.
We should talk about that. We should do a talk about that. It's crazy. So you need to be optimistic, but then you also need to have high standards, which creates stress, and then you need to be optimistic. Anyway, yeah, but thank you.
So, last question for you, Hubert, about the future. Where do you think are the biggest opportunities for creators, for people that are thinking about products?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of what we talked about is that the customer centricity and everything around customer. Like we need to change how we collaborate on the product side. Reopen the communication pipelines and the channels between everybody else at the company. It can be that the product manager is the person who does the research and then shows up with the spec. There needs to be kind of this fabric inside a company where constantly all the conversations are funneled into the product makers, and then constantly everything that the product team is working on is shared with the rest of the company. So on the process level, I think that's how it should be done, and we need a whole kind of system for that. We need different set of best practices. On the future of digital products, there's few things, and I know we don't have much time, but the hard thing about digital products is that there's no constraints. You can always add a new feature somewhere. You can always add a tab, like it always is there. And we need to keep thinking very closely about what are the core needs that people need, and design the products specifically for those needs and not overdo it. And it is harder in the digital world, again, because there's no constraints. So I think that's going to be challenges. There's so many products and there's so many things that we're building. It's like, how do we stay focused, and how don't we create these monstrous try to do everything in one product? Yeah, I mean, obviously there's different areas, like digitization is eating everything, and there's so many opportunities, just like digital transformation, so that there's a lot happening. But on the meta level, I would say just like stay focused, understand the needs, be focused on those, create really good products that are satisfying those needs, and then do it in a collaborative way. It hasn't been the case. It was very much engineering led, very much customers are kind of an afterthought frequently.
If you think about it, like the Agile Manifesto was created almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, 2001.
And in reality, like not everyone really is following Agile principle. Not that everyone should, but also it's not that those are the principles that I think should lead the future, because they were created in a very different reality. So I think it's also time to rethink some of those principles, and from the vision to the strategy to the execution to the tools level. I think the future is bright, and it's never been a better time to build a digital product.
Yeah. Look, if anybody out there is interested in helping us build this kind of company, we're hiring. You know, I would also like to invite people. We will have a summit in October 21st, to learn more about. You know, we coined this term product excellence, which is basically a set of best practices, how the best teams operate and how, you know, the process looks like. So, you know, join us. We're excited to have a conversation with everybody.
Thank you for being in the show. It's been great to share this time and learn from you. Bye, Hubert.
Likewise. Thank you. Bye, everyone.